Warning. The following episode contains subject matter and scenes that some viewers may find upsetting, disturbing, or unnerving. Please note, viewer discretion is advised at all times. Sit back and enjoy.
Welcome to America's Most Wanted. It's one of the most successful shows in television history, catching America's most dangerous criminals. With more than 1,100 suspects already captured, mostly thanks to viewer tips, we are back, and we need your help again. All night, we'll be releasing brand new information on fugitives on the run or in hiding. They may even be living a double life right next door to your home. Tonight, Cleveland, Ohio. 2 girls reported missing. Can you shed any light on this possible crime? America, we need your help.
Hello and welcome back to another I Can Murder a podcast. I'm Tom Norris and I'm joined once again by Ben Carter.
Back it again, Bella.
There you go.
There's one. Just get the one out of the system, and the rest will be fine.
What, the other 20? Hello and welcome back to I Could Murder a podcast. I'm Tom Norris and I'm joined by Ben Carter. Ben, for people that are new to the audience, 3 words to sum the podcast up.
Sublime.
Arrogant. Go on.
Grime.
Right.
And true crime.
That's 2 words. Dan, 1 word.
Fantastic.
Brilliant. And I'm going to go with 1 word. Adequate. But yes, Ben, how are you today?
Not too bad. Filming on a weeknight, which is new for us, a new experience. Feeling ready for it. Ready to, dip the toe into the weeknight flow and see where we go.
Is this rhyming thing going to be for the
No.
whole... You rhymed again then.
Got the rhyming bug.
Adequate really tickled me.
And before we start, a massive thank you to all the new listeners, all the new viewers, all the new people that are following us on the socials. We really, really appreciate it. And those going that little extra mile and backing us on Patreon. You don't have to.
No, you don't have to do that. If you do want to do that, though...
But it means the world.
Go over to patreon.com/couldmurderapod. And over there, it costs about £1 a week, and you get an extra minisode a week. So,
what are we up to now? 40 episodes-ish?
I don't know, Ben. It's round about that, isn't it?
It's around about the 40 mark.
That's too many minisodes. I wouldn't go over there if I were you. And also, don't forget to give us a follow on @CouldMurderAPod on our socials. We've got Facebook, we got Instagram, we got Twitter.
We've got the works. And as always, please feel free to leave a like or a comment. It really helps the channel get out there. Please keep telling your friends and your family about us. We also really, really appreciate that. And Christmas is just around the corner, Tom. Why not head over to ICMAP.store and treat yourself or a loved one to a wonderful Christmas gift.
Yeah, a few months early, but...
Prepared.
Always prepare or prepare to fail. That's not the phrase, but it's something similar to that. And if you're listening to us over on iTunes, why not leave us a review? So Ben, will you reveal to our audience what today's case is?
So this case goes by a few different names. It's the Ariel Castro Kidnappings, also known as the Cleveland Kidnappings, also known as the Cleveland Captives.
And the Monster of Cleveland.
There you go. Many names. The reason we picked this case is it was a name that came up a lot in our research for the Joseph Fritzl episode. And although in researching and prepping for this case, I heard that it was massive worldwide news when it happened, I don't remember hearing about it at the time.
I don't either. I remember actually seeing the gentleman who was toward the end of the case, who helped resolve the case. I remember him being in the news, but that's pretty much all I remember.
Wrote a book. Sorry. So Ariel Castro, this case came up massively when we were prepping for our Joseph Fritzl episode, and in looking into this case even more, this is up there with...
I think as well, like, it's even just... You know how we've argued about this before, but sometimes when you look at someone, you can kind of see there's something that, like Fritzl had a very distinctive kind of look to him. Castro could be, be a mailman, or your postman over here, or he could be just he's just your kind of average looking guy, which makes it even more terrifying.
And again, it's not as elaborate. We'll go on to describe how he did what he did and for how long he did what he did. But it wasn't like this elaborate underground life that he was living like Fritzl. It was very kind of casual in comparison. And I think that's just the fact. And even then, and we'll go on to it, it seemed to just happen. People were at the wrong place at the wrong time. And an unfortunate set of circumstances led to what we're going to talk about today. And yeah, this is rough, this case.
I think the phrase hidden in plain sight, again, very much comes into play with this.
Quite literally.
That's why I said it. But anyway, Ben, let's go through Ariel Castro's childhood and kind of see, how he ended up in the situation he got himself into.
Full name is Ariel Castro, isn't it? That looks like it should have a middle name, but he doesn't.
I don't know what that means. It was someone's name looks like they should have a middle name.
Yeah, it should. Ario
is not his name.
Ariel.
What's your middle name again?
I haven't got one.
I always thought that your name looked like it should have a middle name.
This is going to make it in. So Ariel Castro was born on July 10th, 1960 in a small village called Dewey, which is in Yauco, Puerto Rico. He had a father called Pedro Castro, and he had a mother called Lillian. Pedro was the biggest landowner in that locality within Puerto Rico. So this family, Tom.
Yep.
What have you got for us?
Yeah, as you said, he was the third child. There's 9 siblings in total, both half and full brothers and sisters. So when Ariel was 2, in 1962, his parents would split up because his mother found out basically his dad was married to another woman and had 4 other children. So he wasn't growing up in a household with a kind of strong male role model. His dad, essentially womanizing and living a secret life. Unfortunately for Ariel, his mother wasn't very loving.
Yeah, according to Castro, she was abusive and would insult him and hit him daily with a belt, a stick, or her open hand.
Yeah, he'd apparently he would sometimes even pray for her to die. So that kind of just shows the distaste he had towards her and how he was being treated. It was also reported that when Castro was 5 years old, he was sexually assaulted by a 9-year-old boy nicknamed Pucho. Like we said in other cases, he'd grown up with this kind of already very sexualized environment at a young age, which led him to have a compulsion to masturbate from a very young age, and he was very sexualized from a very young age.
Yeah, so not a stable household at all, no kind of adult role models. He's been sexually abused at a very young age. Things do take a slight turn in the positive direction there when his family make the decision to move to America. Castro, together with his mother and 3 of his full siblings, settled in Reading, Pennsylvania, where they would then move on to relocate to Cleveland, Ohio. And this is where Castro's father was, and also the remainder of his full and half siblings. I think there was a fairly thriving Puerto Rican community there at the time. And again, this is where the Castro family are held in a very high regard. So they're fairly well off financially. They've moved to an area where they can help other fellow Puerto Ricans relocate and help them into employment, help them, house them potentially. So yeah, the family are held in really high regard, and so is Ariel at this point.
So as we said, Castro's relationship with his mother was very difficult, and I think his uncle Ceci kind of realised that, and he actually gave him a guitar to help him kind of escape. Castro got very obsessed with this, and he got really into playing guitar, and eventually would actually lead on to being a professional bass player.
Yeah, the way it was described in most of the documentaries I watched is that he instantly took to the guitar and overnight professional. I thought it was a lot harder than that.
Yeah, I don't think it was like that, but
transitions and
yeah, it'd be weird if they did documentaries in real time. So he got very involved in the kind of Cuban and salsa kind of scene in bands, playing bass in those bands. Apparently, he was quite arrogant though, and he didn't have the best relationship with his band members. He would turn up late, and he would kind of be he had a bit of love for himself.
Yeah, so played bass guitar. He was in the top 3 of all bass guitarists in the general Cleveland area.
Where did you get these stats from, Ben?
Yeah, quite a claim. But apparently, after performing, he'd keep his personal life very private compared to the rest of the band members. But as soon as they finished performing, and either the next band were on, so they weren't a headline act, I imagine.
Headline act was always overrated. Always want to be the support act. No?
Yeah. The opening act also.
No, that's the worst one because people aren't in yet. But second one is
get bums on the seats.
Don't want to be playing seated venues. You want people dancing. You want people moving.
Yeah, well, exactly that. Castro, as soon as they finished, started mingling on the dance floor, and he would approach multiple women in a very short space of time, wanting to kind of dance with them. No one would take him up, but despite multiple rejections within a short period of time, he would continue to go back to the dance floor. Very, very eerie. To go back to his mother, she never remarried, despite his father having that kind of secret second family. She very much, her focus was on raising the family, making sure they were all, cared for, financially okay, and received a good education. And actually, this would be to Castro's benefit because he would graduate from Cleveland's Lincoln West High School in 1979. But he would continue to play local bars. He wanted to pursue a life on the road, slapping that bass. But
So Castro would go on to meet his first real girlfriend, Grimilda Figueroa, when his family moved into a house across the street from hers in the 1980s. Castro, she was quite young at the time, so it was a bit, Castro would go on to take her virginity, and Figueroa's mother demanded that she move in with Castro to avoid the kind of family shame, and the couple would go on to actually have 4 children together.
So they would live between both sets of parents, and at this time, Castro was, very much keeping up the appearances of the good partner, very loving, very charismatic. But things would take a slight turn when Figueroa gave birth to their first child in 1981. Castro's behavior changed drastically at this point, and he became very controlling and abusive. He would often force her to stay at home, and he basically controlled her life from that point onwards. He would pick what TV shows she could watch, where she could go, who she could see.
He'd make her wear long dresses to avoid men looking at her on the street. The controlling behaviour reminds me of a case we did before of Beverly Allett, where she used to mark the chalk marks on the car to see if her partner would basically drive off and use the car. Whereas this, as Ben said, he would control the TV shows she watched, and the way he would do this, he'd feel the back of the TV to see if it was warm, if it'd been out, then look at the TV guide, and he would basically decide that if she'd been watching anything that he didn't want her to watch. It's like it was next level control, and it was controlling, being manipulative, but also it did become physical. He would beat Figueroa, break her nose, ribs and arms. He hit her so hard one time it actually caused a blood clot in her brain, which resulted in an inoperable tumour. And he also threw her down the stairs, cracking her skull. So it was a horrible relationship. This anger kind of, it hadn't really been evident in his behaviour really beforehand. Just suddenly something seemed to snap in him, and he just turned into this monster. Yeah, and in the prep for this episode, there were lots of neighbours interviewed, and they would all come, be completely open and honest, saying, there was a lot of domestic abuse, a lot of violence in the household, a lot of shouting and screaming. But in that particular culture, in that particular community, it was very much, you keep your business to yourself, and that's why again nobody ever intervened, and people kind of kept themselves to themselves. So Figueroa actually became pregnant for a 5th time, and Castro didn't want to have another child, and so he tried to induce a miscarriage by punching her and kicking her in the belly. It just shows how much of a monster he actually was. In 1993, Castro was arrested for domestic violence, but was not indicted by a grand jury. But in 1996, Figueroa did leave the home along with their 4 children, with police assisting in the move. So the police obviously were aware something was up there, and they enough for them to actually assist with the move, which sounds quite drastic in that regard. But I read as well the reason he wasn't indicted was because shortly before he was detained and taken away, he'd managed to get up close to Figueroa and said, "You say anything, I'll kill you." And she would then retract various testimonies. Yeah, apparently even afterwards he continued to harass and threaten her still. I guess it's losing that control he once had on her. He didn't like that at all. So Figueroa attempted afterwards to get a restraining order on Castro due to the injuries and him repeatedly abducting their daughters. And the court itself. Yeah, that sentence in itself is terrifying. But the courts granted this, but was dismissed after a few months. Red flags, like we like to say, already here. He's already shown a lot of traits there: abductions, domestic abuse, manipulation, conditioning. So just prior to this period of time, in 1992, Castro did buy a house, which is on the now infamous 2207 Seymour Avenue. He initially lived there with his wife and 4 children. However, he's now in the house completely alone. And at the time of the purchase, it had an unfinished basement, which never an appealing term, unfinished basement. I mean, it always ends bad. I think a lot of people buy properties with unfinished basements and don't end up doing these kind of things. No? Now alone in his house, Castro begins
some interesting renovation projects. So first of all, he installs a heavy trap door leading to the basement. He also adds padlocks to every door in the house, and also adds curtains and layers of bricks to soundproof certain rooms of the house. Now, potentially under the guise of he has band members over, he plays a lot of loud music, he's got band practice going on. But once this was all finished, he basically forbid anyone else entering other rooms other than on the first floor of his house, apart from himself, and he would just claim that it was either unkempt and messy areas of the house that he just didn't want people to go into. So later, Castro would also tint all of the windows in his house, and even when the family were with him and he had started various bits of this renovation process, he would also lock certain rooms in the house when he would go out and play gigs.
Yeah, he wouldn't let them. He would control. It wasn't just controlling Figueroa, controlling the whole family. He would leave them for up to 4 days when he's doing gigs.
Where's he got that from?
I don't know, but then you think from this, okay, so this kind of behaviour, we mentioned there, him being taken to court for domestic abuse, but apparently he is very charming in the community to other people. He lands a job as a school bus driver, which immediately you think that is not a good mix. I don't know if he picked this job, to be known more in the community and maybe be trusted and seen that, he's the local bus driver, kind of another charm to him, he's playing lots of gigs, he's successful, and while he's doing this kind of thing. In his application, he wrote, "I enjoy working with children, I have a good driving record, I speak English and Spanish, I plan to drive a bus and working with young people."
He must have been fairly good at it because he held that job for 22 years.
Yeah, there's some things we'll get into, which...
Not a completely clean record.
Yeah, you'd be very surprised as to how he managed to keep his job. He was earning $18.91 per hour.
Yeah, which at the time...
Which, if you translate it now, Ben, is £3 million a day.
There you go.
Which is,
not bad going for a bus driver Castro at the time.
It's more than Miss Frizz was getting. Do you remember that show?
No.
The Magic School Bus.
After his family had left the household, obviously, during the day, he's riding the bus.
During the... Bus driver by day, bass player by night.
Well, yeah, and then... BDSM addict behind closed doors.
Later on at night.
Yeah, so you've got your day,
yep,
you've got your night, and then you've got late night.
So Ben's going to go through now some of the incidents that happened with Castro on the bus and how we are completely amazed that he didn't lose his job.
Multiple instances of making illegal U-turns with a full bus full of children. He also used his bus to go grocery shopping, often leaving children locked in the bus.
Doing a big shop, probably. The big Oh.
Yes, he also left a child on the bus while he went for lunch, and he also left the bus unattended while he took a nap at home.
Why is the kid on the bus when he's having lunch? And why is the kid in the bus when he's having a nap at home?
Thinking Ralph Wiggum. A lot of issues for Ariel Castro as a bus driver. So eventually, 22 years into the role, he was fired for bad judgment, which kind of included a rap sheet of everything we've just mentioned.
So enough about buses. We're going to go into the timeline now of the case and see when the monster of Cleveland really came through.
So we start with Michelle Knight. There's no happiness in this story for this person. It's a really, really tough time. As a child, she was bullied and teased at school because she couldn't wash at home, and she often wore hand-me-downs. So she came from a very poor.
She actually growing up and living in the car at the time, so she wasn't able to wash, and she missed a lot of school, so she was a bit behind on kind of in class.
Yeah. I mean, she had the nickname of Shorty, so she was, I believe, 4'7", but she had a very, very tough upbringing. So she would be bullied and teased at school, but she was also assaulted many times at school. She would go on to be sexually abused and raped by a male family member. So she left home as a teenager and actually moved into a bin underneath an overpass, wherein she befriended two drug dealers, one called Sniper and one called Roderick. And these were the first people that actually seemed to care genuinely about Michelle. However, in return for this, it wasn't quite all a positive experience. They did use Michelle as a drug runner in return for housing her, feeding her, and clothing her. However, that was short-lived, and eventually she became pregnant, and as a result, moved back in with her mother. Yeah,
so when she was pregnant, she claimed it was with a boyfriend, but it has been reported it could possibly be where she was actually gang raped. Which is, it's just horrible. But she fell pregnant with her son Joey, and she was living with her mum and her mum's boyfriend at the time. Once when Michelle left the house, she left Joe with her mum, and her mum would then go on to actually leave her son with her boyfriend.
Yeah.
and her boyfriend actually twisted Joey, who was a toddler at the time's leg, and actually broke his leg. They went to hospital, obviously, with Joey. Michelle wasn't completely honest about exactly how it happened. Said he had a fall, but the truth did come out, and it came out that the boyfriend did actually break the toddler's leg. And because of this, Joey was put into foster care, and Michelle, was very keen to get her son back. Someone she loved to bits, and she wanted to give a better childhood to her son than she had. So that's kind of the situation she was in when we fall to this day.
Yeah, and this is we talked about unfortunate set of circumstances. So imagine, because at this point we don't know Castro has anything planned or that he's built any kind of home, prison, and it's just by chance that these two paths kind of encounter one another, which is just absolutely hideous. So on the 22nd of August 2002, 21-year-old Michelle Knight was at her cousin's house and was scheduled to appear in court that afternoon for her 4-year-old son Joey's custody case. And on the way to court, Knight stopped in a convenience store to ask for directions. So basically she was running late, she wasn't able to drive, so she was really panicked if she didn't make this particular appointment that she would lose custody. So a highly stressful situation. So she enters the store to ask for location advice, to ask for directions. Location advice. Can I get some location advice, please? Fucking idiot, Ben.
Start from the beginning. That's right, Daddy. You got to start.
On overhearing the conversation, Knight was offered a ride by Ariel Castro, and since she recognized Castro through knowing his eldest daughter Emily, she trusted him and got into his car. So what the odds here?
Well, she would have been like, she wouldn't believe her luck. She saw him there, she needs to get somewhere, he's a bus driver, he knows the places, even though he has to U-turn everywhere, he knows where he's going apparently, so he's gonna this is, in her eyes, the knight in shining armour right there.
Absolutely. Trusting Castro, she got into his car, and Castro did a huge spin in the car park when she got into the car, which Knight noted was a bit odd, but excused it when Castro said, "My kids love it when I do that."
So I imagine that.
And even if she wanted to get out, she couldn't, as there was no door handle. He's got her in the car. She's in a rush, clearly, to attend this appointment. Immediately gets in the car. He pulls a huge spin to apparently try and make her laugh because his kids love it. She's freaking out. She tries to get out, and there's no door handle on the passenger side.
There's also a little poster on the side of the actual car which says he's selling puppies. And Michelle would go on to, say to him, kind of making kind of polite small talk, how Joey loves puppies. And then Castro kind of saw, maybe, I'll come to my house and we can actually show you a puppy and he can give you one for Joey once you get him back. And then Michelle's obviously thinking, oh, that's amazing, that's great. And that kind of made her feel like it wasn't strange they're going by the house.
And the thing that blows my mind about all of this is that all of this is happening through complete chance.
I think as well, like we said, he looks a very unassuming guy. So
yeah,
and you probably would know him from being the local bus driver. He's quite well known around the neighbourhood for playing in the bands, and his daughters seem to be very popular and have a lot of friends around the area as well.
Yeah, he looked like he would be selling puppies.
I don't know what that means.
Just non-assuming. So yeah, as Tom said, he's promised her a free puppy for her son, so she can't believe her luck, and they head back to Castro's home with the promise of seeing this puppy. Once inside the house, Knight was led upstairs and told that the puppies were sleeping. When they reached the second floor of the house, Castro took Knight into a room, locking the door behind him. Castro then restrained her with extension cords, raped her, and left her there for 3 days without food. He left her gagged with a dirty sock in her mouth, and at this point, Michelle Knight, completely unaware that is the start of her captivity in the Castro household.
So Knight's family did report her missing, but people assumed that she was so distraught over losing her son's custody battle that she actually ran away on her own. I mean, previously her running away from the family home before, it maybe, it wouldn't be too out of question to kind of think that would be a possibility. Yeah. Because she was 21, it wasn't taken as seriously. She was an adult. It wasn't as alarming as a child going missing. So people believe that the police weren't as interested in the case because she was older. And some people suspect Castro mistook her as being a lot younger because of her height, because being under 5 foot. And talking about the manipulation thing, Castro apparently said to Michelle that she wasn't his first victim. He captured a girl before, but said, "I'm not going to tell you if she made it out alive."
Yeah, so high contrast in terms of the family, putting pressure on the police to look for Michelle compared to what we're going to go on to discuss with the following two captives. So on the 21st of April 2003, so around 8 months later, Amanda Berry, a high school student who grew up in the Cleveland area, was leaving her part-time job at Burger King. She had almost booked the day off as it was the day before her 17th birthday, but she decided to go in and work the shift. Berry called her sister sister at around 8 p.m. that evening, saying that she was getting a ride home. It turns out she had accepted a ride from Castro as she went to middle school with one of his younger daughters, Angie.
Yeah, so basically Castro had driven past with Angie in the car, and then apparently he had spotted the fact that Amanda kind of recognised her and gave a bit of a smile when she drove past. So once he had dropped off his daughter, he turned around and he went back to go see her. Castro picked her up, started driving her back. Then he drove past her house, which Angie kind of was like asking him why he was going past, and he was saying, "Oh no, come home and see my daughter Angie. She would love to kind of see you." So once he got Amanda inside, he began to show her around the house, and she walked past the doorway, and apparently she saw through the door Michelle Knight sleeping through the hole in the door, and she asked her, who's that? And Castro apparently responded saying it was a roommate. Eventually he forced her into a room and told her to pull down her pants. After assaulting her, he took her into the basement and tied her hands and feet with tape and put a belt over the tape on her feet. He also put a helmet on, like a motorcycle helmet on her, and that's essentially, I think, it was just to kind of muffle out the screams. And he said if she kind of complied with everything, he would take her home. But sadly, that wasn't the case.
Berry's disappearance was reported immediately by her family. Now, they had some arguments in the days building up to her abduction. Police initially did consider her a runaway. However, a week later, her family received a call from Amanda's phone from an unknown male stating, "I have Mandy, she's fine and will be coming home in a couple of days." And the kind of more convincing element of that is the fact that Amanda was referred to as Mandy by only her close friends.
With this as well, it's kind of conflicting because it was her birthday coming up. She apparently had lots of presents at home and she was very excited about it. She also had some money that she'd been given that she kind of stored away in one of her cupboards for her birthday. So it didn't really make sense. She wouldn't run away without taking the money. Yeah. Why wouldn't she, wait until she received her 17th birthday presents? It all kind of didn't add up, and the family very much didn't think she had run away.
Yeah, especially with some random, strange-sounding male.
Exactly, yeah. And as Ben said, with the phone call, the FBI were able to narrow down the phone's location to a 30 to 40 block area, but were unable to find Berry. And I find this so disturbing, as Castro would actually listen to the voicemails from the family pleading for her to come home. He would kind of gladly listen to them and just kind of enjoy them. He would even go as far as deleting the messages in order to get new messages of people pleading for her to come back.
Yeah.
He's getting sick enjoyment out of that.
He's vetting these voicemails, but he would then go on to kind of torture Amanda by only playing her segments of voicemails from her loved ones and relatives. And it would always be the point when she could just start to hear her mother's voice that he would immediately either turn the phone off or take the phone away from her, which is just...
It's just evil, yeah. So in January 2004, in response to an investigation by Child and Family Services after Castro had intentionally or inadvertently left a child on a school bus, police attended Castro's home at 2207 Seymour Avenue, however were unable to make any contact with anyone inside the house. He was not charged over this, and they did not discover the two women that had been kidnapped. Because he said things before, make any noise, I'll kill you. I think, they couldn't really hear a lot of things as well, because he'd play like radios in rooms or play TVs in rooms, so they couldn't really hear what was going on. He was still doing things like, leaving a kid on the school bus. He was doing these things which you wouldn't do if you didn't want people, you want to be flying under the radar.
You don't want to draw any attention to yourself.
Yeah.
It was a stupid question I had, first of all, and that was, if you've already got one captive, why would you then go and take another? And obviously from Castro's perspective, it's hideous, because he had then felt that Michelle wasn't really his type, but also he'd had his way with her, and he was then looking for, apparently he had a fascination for blondes, which Amanda Berry was. Michelle at this point becomes kind of secondary to his second captive, and it basically, he has his way with them, he has his fun with them, and beats them. Anytime he would even leave the house, he would chain them to a pole, or chain them to the wall or to the ceiling, and then put gaffer tape over their mouth. So even if someone was to pass the house, there's nothing they could do. All the windows were tinted, all the rooms were padlocked, and he had no family or friends around the house. So even if people would visit, he would keep certain elements of the house completely cordoned off.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, his neighbours thought he was a bachelor. But the other thing to kind of mention here was he did actually have a long-term girlfriend during this stage. He was going to have a woman called Lillian, the same name as his mother, but apparently with her, he was very charming. He wasn't being violent with her whatsoever. Some people speculate maybe, they're Freudian there with the same sharing the same name as his mother, but he was apparently very charming. Her family loved him. They thought, because he was driving one of the nicest cars in the neighborhood. He was in a band. He was well known, and he was like making good money. He worked with children. It's like he was ticking all the boxes for her. She was very happy in their relationship. It was completely unbeknown to her, the fact that he was obviously living this double life.
Again, you don't know what happens behind closed doors. This is that to the absolute extent.
Behind padlocked doors.
Well, So the 2nd of April 2004, 14-year-old Georgina De Jesus, a 7th grader, was walking home from Wilbur Wright Middle School in Cleveland with Arlene, who was Castro's youngest daughter. The two were planning a sleepover at Arlene's house. However, Figueroa, who's Castro's ex-wife, said no to this and that the pair were to then go their separate ways. Georgina had decided to walk home rather than take the bus as her mother had requested and save the $1.25 for sweets. On the 40-block walk home, she encountered Castro, who asked her if she knew where his daughter Arlene was, as she had just seen Arlene. So basically, as Georgina had just seen Arlene, she was more than happy to show Castro where his daughter went. Castro then offers her a ride home, which she accepts. He drives De Jesus back to his house, at which point De Jesus questions why he is going in the opposite direction to her house. Castro then asks for her help taking a speaker into the house and also stated that he believed his daughter would be home by now and that she would want to see him. So that's the really horrible part. So he obviously gets her a point where he's saying, you know, I'm really worried about my daughter. Can you help me find her? Get in the car. There's no way she's going to refuse, is she?
And she trusts, obviously it's her best friend, it's her dad, she trusts him, and yeah, she saw where she went, she thought she could help him. And then the weird thing is he keeps going between the story of to find my daughter, but also to help me put the speaker in the house, keeps kind of going to and from those two stories, which is a bit odd anyway.
So Castro asks her for help taking a speaker into the house, claiming that, you know what, my daughter's probably already home and you want to see her. Castro then started to touch her, and this is a 14-year-old girl. De Jesus tries to stop him and he leads her to what she thought was an exit. Castro manages, however, to trap her in his basement by telling her that the door was the way out. So basically he said, yeah, you can leave, but you're not leaving the way you came in, you have to leave through this way. And he always kept certain doors locked, so it was believable that maybe there was a back door or a different way of exiting the house. Once he gets her in the basement, he traps her there and then grabs her and chains her up. Castro wouldn't start raping De Jesus until a month after her kidnapping. So he's progressively picked younger targets.
Yeah.
He's used his daughters in every attempt to get these three girls.
So he was very opportunistic with this. I don't think the daughters, obviously, I didn't know anything about this. They weren't implicit in any of this, but he was able to kind of use them in order to pick, they already have their trust.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's hard. I mean, I imagine the guilt the daughters must have for being kind of involved without knowing about it.
Definitely.
So because no one witnessed the abduction, the Amber Alert was not used, and their father spoke out about this, saying the Amber Alert should always be used for a missing child, whether it's an abduction or a runaway. A child needs to be found. We need to change this law. So at the start of their imprisonment, all three girls were chained up in the basement. Eventually, they were all allowed to go upstairs, however, were kept chained by the waist at all times and padlocked in rooms on the second floor with a hole in each door to spy on them. They weren't in rooms really together, mingling. They could kind of talk through the walls with one another a little bit. As you mentioned before, Castro would kind of manipulate the girls and kind of show favoritism to some and not to the others. During winters, he would keep them in the cold basement. During summers, would keep them in the hot attic. He was so evil with his actions.
He didn't want them to form any kind of bond against him, so he would alternate who his favourite was and who would then get the worst of his beatings, and more often than not, the one that got the worst of it was Michelle.
Yeah, Michelle said apparently she thinks that the reason she got the worst of it was because he couldn't break her.
Yeah.
In terms of because she'd been through this before, she says she's very strong on this, and she wasn't letting him break her. So for their conditions, they had to use a bin for their toilet. Castro would buy them snacks and offer to buy them colouring books, which is quite odd for their age. Even they're 14, that's an odd thing to be buying. He even bought one of them a journal, and she recorded in secret how many times she actually had been raped, which was useful evidence later on. But when he was acting nice, he would always come with a price. If he'd offered them a weekly shower, they'd only get a shower if it was with him as well. Yeah. But the girls apparently, they learned how to make themselves numb to this abuse, and yeah, he basically would play favourites and just kind of make them resent one another and give one more clothes than the others, one more food than the other.
Systematically trying to break their
spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. And the horrible thing about De Jesus as well is that's his youngest daughter's best friend.
Yeah.
She lives in the same neighborhood. Because they'd pinpointed a certain area, Castro was involved in setting up crime scene tape.
Yeah, he'd get involved with vigils, and try and offer help with and get close to the family, offering his assistance.
The father of De Jesus as well would have beers in his garden, so it'd literally be within the same premises that his daughter was chained up.
Yeah, it's just horrible to think about. I mean, it really does seem like he liked to play with fire with that kind of thing. So yeah, still in April 2004, the FBI led a large-scale search for De Jesus, which Castro apparently attended, as well as featuring her case on America's Most Wanted. Neither venture amounted to any leads, and Castro also attended a number of vigils, like I said, for the girls along with their grieving families.
Yeah, apparently he would also write songs for them and play music out loud.
Just the kind of the America's Most Wanted thing, yeah, he got the girls to watch that together with him, which, you know, just showing his kind of handiwork there. He'd even tease Michelle because Michelle was thought as a runaway because of her age. It wasn't being made as a bigger case than the other girls, and saying like, no one wants to find you, and no one's looking for you. It's just, yeah, very manipulative.
Other things Castro would do, and this is absolutely hideous as well, he would force the girls to celebrate the anniversaries of their abduction by bringing them cake and physically forcing them to celebrate it. He would also periodically bring in their missing persons posters as well and tease them with that as well, saying they're never going to find you.
Yeah, one of the girls, I remember, she decorated hers and she kept it because she wanted to give it to her mum once she was free.
Well, that's your motivation for getting out of there, I guess.
So in November 2004 on the Montel Williams show, Sylvia Brown, a well-known psychic, tells Amanda Berry's mother that her daughter is dead, saying she's not alive, honey, and is in the water.
I think she pinned it down to her having the opinion that Amanda was not the type of girl not to call you. The horrible thing is as well, Amanda Berry's mother would die 7 years later after a battle with cancer. So she died thinking that her daughter was dead because of a psychic. So on the 2nd of March 2006, Amanda Berry's mother, Luana Miller, passes away at the age of 43. She was hospitalized with pancreatitis and other ailments. However, the cause of death was officially ruled as heart failure, which the family attributes to the stress of losing her daughter. And obviously now a psychic has got it into her head that her daughter was absolutely no longer with them. She had spent the last 3 years of her life searching for Amanda, and a city councillor, Donna Brady, who had spent time with the family throughout their search for Amanda, said Luana Miller literally died of a broken heart. That's the horrible thing. She's gone on to the Montel Williams show to generate, publicity for the fact that her daughter's still missing. The De Jesus family and the Berry family are actively, fighting to find their daughters. They believe that they're both still alive, and they have a psychic on national television just say, she's not alive, honey. Yeah,
and as I mentioned with kind of Castro poking fun at night, at one stage, he actually brought her outside and was making her dig her own grave in the backyard. So the 22nd of September 2006, a tip is received in relation to Gina De Jesus' disappearance and two men. One was a registered sex offender. The tip included a suggestion that she was buried under the driveway of one of these men, which was dug up. However, the dig revealed nothing was there and the men were released. When Gina's body wasn't found, her mother Nancy Ruiz said, "I know deep in my heart that my baby's still out there."
So they'd cordoned off an area to do this dig, and this is the part where Castro came out and literally helped them tape off the area for them to dig. So no doubt he was going back into the house, either pointing out the window or kind of...
Yeah, it's a common thing in, trying to be involved in, like Ian Huntley with the Soham case, being involved in the searches, wanting to kind of rejoice in their kind of the pain of the family, but also appear like the hero.
So on Christmas Day 2006, having been raped repeatedly by Castro, Amanda Berry falls pregnant and gives birth to a baby girl. Castro had ordered Michelle Knight to assist in the birth, threatening her with death if the baby did not survive. The birth takes place in a small inflatable swimming pool, with the baby needing resuscitation at least once after it had been born. Berry named her daughter Jocelyn.
The thing to note here is Michelle actually became pregnant several times from Castro, and he would force her to have miscarriages, which she has previous with Figueroa. Apparently the first time he used a barbell to hit Knight in the stomach to force a miscarriage, and then afterwards he would blame Michelle Knight for the miscarriage, saying he said I hated him and that I killed his child. Then he punched me in my face, saying that it was all my fault. So he's forced her to miscarry, and then he's gaslighting her, saying it was her fault and she did it because she hated him. But he had done this 4 to 5 times to Michelle Knight, which, as we said, it seems that he had a real bitterness towards her.
Yeah, it's similarities to that Figueroa, his first partner, because obviously she had multiple miscarriages. He pushed her down the stairs, punched her in the stomach, hit her, with intention to cause a miscarriage. And maybe it's the fact that, it can be argued that a big part of the motivations for this is the fact that Figueroa had gotten away and met another man, and he wanted that control of not being able to let anyone leave him.
Yeah, talking about Figueroa and the other man, he actually got his daughters to pretend or to claim that the other man had been sexually abusing them, and they made a report to the police. And Castro, like, he's able to manipulate his own children, seemingly, because they were grown up in the household knowing how he was to their mother and, like, abducting them at a young age. But he still was able to manipulate his kids in order to,
try and get that.
And apparently he was an innocent man, and he was...
Yeah, he was a security guard at the hospital that she had kept in and out of when he was beating her. So he eventually was the one to convince her to leave Castro, saying, this is no life. And then Castro straight away can't handle, obviously, jealousy or the fact that someone's left him and not having that control. Starts to try and turn his own daughters against this man. So absolutely hideous.
So April 2009, the FBI expands their search for DeJesus and Berry, as well as a third girl, Ashley Summers, another young girl who disappeared aged 14 in 2007 in Cleveland. Initially thought to be a runaway, there was renewed interest in her case as it had been linked to the nearby kidnappings of Berry and DeJesus. Police were looking for a single kidnapper, as all disappeared within a few blocks of each other. They did not link these cases to Michelle Knight. That case isn't actually linked to this case, it is just a coincidence, but you can see where the police are kind of thinking this now, that it's bizarre that these people are missing at the same time. I think the ages were a huge thing. It's 21, 17, 14. Yeah. So kind of thinking that she wouldn't be linked within that.
And I think Michelle Knight's mother actually dropped the missing persons report after she'd been on there for 2 years, claiming that you're not gonna that's her gone. Which is, that's so sad.
So Jocelyn, Amanda's daughter, is growing up in this household, and she's reaching the age. She's 4 years old. Apparently, a thing that Amanda used to do would pretend to walk her to nursery, and she'd walk around the room, and then she would pretend to kind of cross the roads, teaching her things like, oh, you have to stop when it's red, the light's red, carry on when it's green. And then she would take her to nursery, and then she would say goodbye, and she'd come back and she'd be the teacher and kind of start teaching her things, trying to make it as nice for Jocelyn as possible in a horrible situation. The strange thing here is Castro started, really like loving Jocelyn, and he would take her out of the house. This is in 2010. He would take her out of the house, introduce her to various relatives as either his granddaughter or his new girlfriend's daughter, and he'd also take her to a Sunday church services down the street. So this stage, he's really playing with fire here, because he's bringing his daughter out of the house, but the neighbours assumed it was just his granddaughter. He was playing in the back garden. She was always there. That was just he's just been a good grandfather.
Jocelyn is absolutely the key to this case, and if there's any kind of positive moment to the case, it's the fact that when she's born, she gives renewed hope and renewed purpose to all of the captives. They're all just, creating this environment where, because this is all Jocelyn knows. She's raised in a prison, essentially.
When she's getting to the age of 4, though, and she's kind of being let out and being allowed to walk around outside, she's actually saying to Castro, to unchain them and, to treat them better and things like that. So she was able to see even from that age, how troubling this whole situation was. But she definitely did bring kind of a new kind of lease of life to the girls in the house.
Yeah, so it's kind of between 8 to 6 years that they've been in varying states of captivity. And at multiple points, all 3 of them went through and had kind of suicidal thoughts about not seeing a way out of this. However, when the arrival of Jocelyn very much gives them all a new sense of hope, new sense of purpose, and it also at the same time, as Tom mentioned, starts to break down Castro's guard a little bit.
Jocelyn asking Castro to unchain them and stuff like that, that'd be putting him in a predicament, making him question some things as well. So the girls as well, they wanted to be brave for Jocelyn, and they kind of wanted to be there for her and make it as comfortable as possible for her as well.
So November 2011, Castro's neighbour, Israel Lugo, hears pounding on the doors of Castro's house, which had plastic bags over the windows, and he ends up reporting this to the police. Lugo said that when the officers attended the house, they knocked on the door, received no answer, and then walked around the house, apparently finding nothing out of the ordinary. They then left.
There's a lot of kind of near misses here. You could argue, the police weren't being as thorough, but it's so easy to say this once we know obviously what's inside the house. But there's another near miss there. So July 2012, after receiving a tip from someone at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility, police search a vacant lot looking for Berry at West 30th between Wade and Seymour, right around the corner from where Castro's house was. The tip was from prison inmate Robert Walford, who was convicted of murdering a homeless man. He wrote letters to law enforcement telling them that he knows where Amanda's body is. Walford even passed a polygraph test when questioned about this, and he showed the police the exact site and where to dig, but nothing was found, and it all turned out that it was all a big hoax. It was just a coincidence that it was right around the corner from where Castro was. Thinking about this, like the families hearing about this, they hear it. They kind of, the hope that they could actually get some closure from burying their daughter, but then the confirmation that she's dead, but then actually, no, it's all a hoax, so she could still be alive. It's just an absolute roller coaster for them.
So also July of 2012, another of Castro's neighbours, Elsie Cintron, claims to have contacted police reporting various strange activities at the Castro residence, such as a baby in the attic window, which is a horrifying thought straight away.
But yeah, so apparently it was Jocelyn just in the window, and as we said, people thought he was a bachelor. A baby in the window is an odd thing to see.
She decided to call the police after her granddaughter said she had seen a naked lady crawling in the backyard of his house with a dog collar on.
Yeah, so with that as well, so the police weren't as thorough with that check. Apparently residents of the care home also saw 3 girls in chains, naked with a collar on, being abused in the garden. They called the police and no one came. And shortly after, Castro made his fences even taller and used a tarp to obstruct the view of his garden. That makes me, I'm not making a conspiracy theory here, but a lot of the times the police, if you're getting that call, I think fair enough, sometimes you might be like, okay, you've heard some noises. Some people, I imagine they get a lot of calls every day, which is kind of like, oh, you've heard noises or something, that's a bit strange.
Yeah.
Hearing the fact there's 3 naked girls in dog collars being abused in chains in the back garden, that's
multiple people.
Yeah, that's something where you're obviously going to go and be very thorough with the check-in there.
Yeah. So, I mean, that lines up slightly as well. So over this 10-year period that the girls were held captive, they were allowed outside just 2 times. And it was kind of disclosed in books that the girls have written, as well as in the courts, that they were allowed outside in costumes.
The 6th of May 2013, Castro leaves the house, accidentally leaving the big inside door open. The girls thought he may be doing this to test them, because sometimes he would do this.
Yeah. He
would leave the door open, and then he would wait around the corner and see if they came around the corner, and then he would pounce on them, and then he would go on to punish them. So they actually would go on to use Jocelyn to kind of walk around and kind of see if he was there, and it turns out he wasn't there. Then Amanda kind of walked down through the door. So it wasn't actually the front door wasn't open. It was the door. It was the kind of door to the porch, the front door. Yeah. So she opened that, realised the next door was actually locked, but she could kind of fit her arm through the door. So as she reached her arm through the door and started screaming in hopes that someone could hear them. A lucky neighbour, Charles Ramsey, who we mentioned earlier on, hears Berry scream, and on seeing her trying to escape, he helps her get out of the house. So basically he runs to the door. He was eating at McDonald's at the time, apparently put down his burger, ran to the door. He said, break the glass through the glass. She couldn't break through the glass, so he said, kick the bottom panel out. So she managed to kick the wooden panel out, and he helped her with that. Then he managed to kind of pull her through, and then pull Jocelyn through as well. Once she was out, she said, I've been kidnapped, I've been missing for 10 years and I'm here and I'm free now. So they ring 911, both of them ring 911. They kind of made it clear what happened, and people couldn't quite believe what was going on.
Yeah, so this is where the now viral clip of Charles Ramsey giving his interview statement around what he had witnessed and what had happened came out with the line, "You know something is wrong when a pretty little white girl runs into a black man's arms." And there was some kind of controversy around, what actually went down and how she was broken out. There was another eyewitness that claimed to have, I think that basically, it seems to me that they were fighting over who did the most for her to get her out.
Yeah, it's disputed how much Ramsey was involved in it. I guess the bigger picture here was actually the fact that they'd been saved. But yeah, he got a lot of kind of notoriety from this. So police started attending the property, announced themselves, walking through the upstairs hallway with guns drawn. After seeing the police through a partially open bedroom door, Knight leapt into an officer's arms, repeating, "You saved me, you saved me." De Jesus is also found. All 3 women and the child are taken to the nearby Metro Health Medical Centre. Berry and De Jesus are released from the hospital the next day, where Knight was discharged 4 days later. As we said, it seemed to be he would pick on Michelle more than the other girls. When Michelle actually got out, she weighed only 38 kilos, with police actually believing from a small stature that she was actually a child and not a 32-year-old woman. Knight has since said, I was very sick. I found out that I had a bacterial infection eating away at my stomach, and they told me I only had 2 days to live, so things weren't looking really bright." Yeah. So yeah, the timing of this was obviously,
They considered putting her into a hospice as well, because it was viewed that, it was highly unlikely she would actually make a full recovery, just to kind of speak for the extent of her condition.
Yeah, and you think how Michelle's life has been, that would be, getting free and then dying a few days afterwards would have been, so luckily she did go on to make a full recovery from that.
So there were also the police radio calls of the time of the discovery as well. So they've got Amanda, Berry and Jocelyn out on the street, but when they're then going to discover 2 more girls within the Castro residence, you can hear them on the radio. And initially they believe that when they say we've got 2 more, they're thinking they've got 2 more dead bodies.
Oh.
And then also there's one really powerful bit where one of the officers literally entering the scene says this actually might be real.
The police, I know everyone would have heard about, these missing girls. And, it's kind of like one of those things where I think it's etched into our brains, like Madeleine McCann, for example. The idea that someone actually would find this person and who's been, they've known all these years without knowing them and kind of seeing them, this is actually real. It would be very striking to kind of realise that we've actually saved these girls.
The whole case is too impossible to seem real, but it happened.
So later on that day, Castro is arrested at a nearby McDonald's along with his two brothers, Pedro and Onel. So police arrest Ariel and Onel Castro in the car park at McDonald's, and whilst they were being put in handcuffs, Onel asked police if this was about his brother Pedro and gives him the address he was at where police later arrested him. The brothers were later released and cleared of any wrongdoing, police having determined that Pedro and Onel had no knowledge of their brother's crimes. I love how Onel kind of just threw his brother under the bus there.
Basically, the brother that Onel was concerned about was the brother that had an outstanding charge for open alcohol, but obviously it was much more serious than that. So on the 8th of May 2013, Castro is charged with 4 counts of kidnapping and 3 counts of rape. Initially, considering everything he does, that sounds fairly timid. But when you go to the extent of the charges, which happens the following month on the 7th of June 2013.
Because it's proved that he's sane of mind and he's ready to stand trial. From the kind of reports, they're quite surprised how normal he seemed, which again is very disconcerting.
And he wouldn't enter a plea, would he? He would just remained absolutely silent for a majority of the trial. However, eventually he would enter a plea. The 7th of June 2013, a grand jury indicts Castro on 329 total counts, including 139 counts of rape, 177 counts of kidnapping, 7 counts of gross sexual imposition, 3 counts of felonious assault, 2 counts of aggravated murder, which was for the forced miscarriages that night, and 1 count of possession of criminal tools. After reading the charges, Judge Pamela Barker asked Castro, "Mr. Castro, would you please look at me, sir? Need to make sure you understand what I am saying." And this was because throughout the whole sentencing, Castro had his eyes closed and head lowered. Castro would then plead not guilty, and his bail was set at $8 million.
He would say that the girls were complicit in a lot of the acts, and he would say they were doing it for money, which, you can quickly prove wrong. I just want to kind of note the fact that obviously with the amounts of rape, I think that was very much helped by the notepad being kept with, or the diary, being kept with the amount of times they've been raped as well, which was helpful evidence for that. Yeah, him pleading not guilty just shows how deluded he was as well.
100%. And he even tried to say that the blame was on the girls because they're the ones that got into the car.
So 26th of July 2013, Castro agrees to a plea deal, sparing him from the death penalty, pleading guilty to 937 charges, which included kidnapping, rape and murder. On the 1st of August 2013, Castro is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 1,000 years. So this is a quote from Castro during his sentencing. "I would like to apologise to the victims, Amanda Berry, Gina DeSuze and Michelle Knight. I am truly sorry for what happened. I just hope that they can find it in their hearts to forgive me. I ask God to forgive me, I ask my family, and I apologise to my family also for putting them through all this. I want to apologise to the state of Ohio, the city of Cleveland. I just want to apologise to everyone who was touched by these events." You're trying to tick every box with what you're apologising. In a weird way, it's too open in terms of being like, I want to apologise to Cleveland. He's gone through the court case saying that they essentially wanted it, they were complicit, and now he's going, I'm sorry. He even feels snidey the fact that he apologised to Michelle last in that list as well.
The other quote that just stuck out like a sore thumb, he said, "I hope they can find it in their hearts to forgive me because we had a lot of harmony in that home."
So as we mentioned before, with the girls being abducted, a lot of it had to do with the kind of daughters knowing them. Arlene Castro said, "I would have to say I'm really disappointed, embarrassed, mainly devastated about the whole situation."
So September the 3rd, 2013, just 1 month into serving his life sentence, Castro was found hanging from a bedsheet in his prison cell. He was 53 at the time of his death, and prison staff were supposed to be kind of performing routine because he was on suicide watch, kind of every 13 minutes checking in on him. It was revealed that obviously certain checks had been missed. They attempted to perform CPR on him. However, this was unsuccessful, and he was immediately taken to Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead shortly after.
I think what that is, he's really fought there to be not given the death penalty.
Yeah, he wants it on his
terms.
Terms.
It was kind of speculated it could have been an accident from an asphyxia masturbation. That's not how you say it. Dan, what is it again? What do you do? Ex-fixie wank.
That's the one.
That's the one. But it was believed because he had his kind of pictures of his family members in front of him, a Bible next to him. It was kind of ruled out afterwards because they felt like it was more kind of ritual, like more of a ritual for him actually, asking for forgiveness and killing himself.
Yeah, and I mean, on the fact that there was a lot of controversy around guards not performing the correct checks. Although he had been on suicide watch, he was not on suicide watch at the exact time of his death, but he had been subjected to routine checks every 30 minutes due to the notoriety he had in the prison. 2 guards were found to have not completed those particular checks at the time, but they stood by their ruling of suicide.
So a little bit more on Michelle Knight. The injuries she actually suffered at the hands of Castro left her unable to have children, which is horrible. She would go on to change her name to Lily Rosalie and would go on to marry a mutual friend on Facebook. So a bit more of a lighter note there for Michelle. And you can only imagine how guilty Castro's daughters felt throughout all of this. There's lots of interviews with them now, kind of saying that how they obviously had no idea how guilty they felt. They're very articulate with how they spoke. You can see it's all very genuine, but their father put them in that position, obviously abducting some of their best friends, and it's just so messed up with how he kind of used everyone and manipulated everyone for what he wanted.
Yeah, there was one part as well where he had at one point all 3 of the girls in the garage of the house. He had conditioned them so much to the point where he took all the gags out of their mouth and said, "Look, scream. There's a busy street outside, scream." And they were all so terrified of him, despite the fact that they could see people out on the street, that they all refused to scream. So he'd completely manipulated him. The easy comparison is Fritzl. We've done an episode on Joseph Fritzl. The difference is, though, and obviously I'm not trying to paint Fritzl as any kind of saint here, but
I'm glad.
Yeah. But he had no emergency contingency plan if something happened to him, and the girls would be,
which has been speculated with the Fritzl one that was just what he said. But yeah, that's the thing. I think that's one of his daughters was saying as well. What was his game plan here? Because he was an older guy. If he died, they would have all just starved to death. And horrible.
Fritzl obviously gave them slightly more support during childbirth, not a massive amount more support. There was no kind of elaborate dungeon. Never thought it would be possible because that case was hard to cover.
Yeah.
But I never thought it would be possible for someone to just completely take that to a new depth. It's hideous.
Yeah, they're both very dark in their own kind of ways there. We mentioned earlier on the psychic Sylvia Brown. Surprise, Sylvia Brown was wrong. She said to Amanda Berry's mother that her daughter was dead, saying she's not alive, honey, and she's in water. And I basically wanted to check and see that obviously she must apologise for saying such a stupid thing and being completely wrong about it. But she refused to comment on the whole thing. And this wasn't the first time she'd done this. Apparently in 2003, Brown incorrectly told the parents of missing teen Sean Hornbeck that their son was dead and his body could be found somewhere near 2 jagged boulders. 4 years later, Hornbeck was found alive. So,
awful person.
Yeah.
You're abusing vulnerable people that are at a time of need.
Yeah.
So
not a fan.
No.
And if you're a psychic, what am I thinking about you now? Yeah. How about that? Should probably get it wrong. He loves me.
So a little bit more just before we go into some lighter relief. It's widely believed that having his marriage with Figueroa having broken down, that Castro told his prisoners that Berry was his new wife, and that he began raping Knight and De Jesus in the backyard rather than inside the house in front of his new wife. The other element is obviously that he allowed Berry to go through with the pregnancy and have the baby, whereas with Michelle, obviously he forced miscarriages multiple times. His initial intention was to leave the newborn Jocelyn on the steps of a church after she was born, but at the time of birth he basically manifested excitement about becoming a father again, albeit in those conditions.
That's similar, like as you compared with Fritzl. It's kind of that's the child actually in both cases are the thing that kind of changed this, didn't it? And the love for the child and they're thinking to themselves they've got a family they're making there, which
kept them going.
Yeah, horrible.
And another interesting thing is that Berry named the girl Jocelyn, which was in defiance of Castro's insistence that she had a Spanish name. So as part of that particular plea bargain, Castro's house where he had lived and held the women captive was demolished on the 7th of June 2013. And interestingly, Michelle Knight was present and actually handed out yellow balloons to spectators, which she said represented missing children. The balloons were released before De Jesus's aunt began the demolition by the swing of a crane. But that felt bloody good. According to WKYC sources, Castro did not have an exit plan. So we discussed that, if something happened to Castro, what would happen to his captives. They believe that Castro felt he would eventually be caught and eventually have to turn himself over. He would refer to himself as cold-blooded and a sex addict, and someone that was abused in his childhood as his reasonings for conducting his crimes. Police did find a suicide note in his home in which he discussed the abductions and wrote that his money and possessions should be given to the kidnapped women if he were ever caught.
Amanda Berry was actually brought onto stage at Roverfest in Cleveland in 2013 by Nelly during his set, waving to the crowd and getting everyone to cheer, and I think she was very into her music. And yeah, that was a nice little.
Castro would have hated that because apparently, and this goes back to him not letting his wife watch certain television programs. Apparently, with the girls, although he let the girls watch TV, if he ever found them listening to black music or watching black TV shows, he would viciously beat them. So there's an element of racism to Castro as well. So he would have not been a fan of Nelly, I imagine.
And talking about music, but he would have been a fan probably of this person. Tonight, actually, said years that she spent trapped in a room with the Jesus. Adele's Skyfall, they used to sing that together when they were down and out, and it kind of would cheer them up.
He would occasionally, to go back to some of the more captive elements, he would occasionally bring the girls fast food as a treat. So he would spend a lot of his time in McDonald's. And his house, if you look at photos, it looked like a hoarder's kind of house. And that was often the excuse he gave as, I lock the rooms because they're a mess and I don't want people going in them. But he had food wrappers, old mouldy food. He didn't look after himself, wasn't very hygienic. And obviously he would force that onto the girls as well when he would live this double life.
So McDonald's has got a fair few mentions in this case.
It absolutely has. Absolutely.
You're welcome, Ronald.
Just to kind of emphasize how close to home this all was, the three girls were taken from 106th Street, 105th Street, and 110th Street. So that's within 5 blocks of one another, all within a 2-year period. Castro's home was visited twice by police in investigating this and for the complaints that were raised around loud noises and public disturbances, but again, no action was taken. There were a lot of red flags, I think, as we said, that were missed on Castro.
Yeah, and a lot of the neighbours felt guilt afterwards for not discovering this or reporting this, but, it's one of those things, it's so easy just to feel this way or blame yourself after the fact, but yeah, I think we can just take solace in the fact that he's no longer around and the girls are. So we're moving on to a bit that I know Ben enjoys.
I've gone steady this week.
You're going steady this week, are you? Well, I'll let you go first. I think you're going to like mine. I really hope you haven't got the same as me. But
so I've got two. Bit nervous about them. So my first one is he looks like a less innocent Richard Attenborough from Jurassic Park. The Welcome to Jurassic Park man.
Just because he's got a beard
and glasses.
Okay.
Dan? No. Look at these two photos.
No.
Okay, well, my better one...
I'm sorry, no.
My better one, slightly more niche. He looks like Gale from Breaking Bad.
Good.
Or in Flight of the Conchords guy.
Oh, yeah, he is.
Yeah, that's the better out of the two. So I've gone for an old one that I saw a lot of pictures of him of. I think he looks a bit like Parasite the Wrestler when they went to just that one night in that particular hat. I think there's a bit of similarity there.
That's pretty good.
So that was the case of Ariel Castro, the Cleveland Monster.
As always, thank you so much for choosing to watch or listen to our podcast. We really, really appreciate it. For all the new subscribers, followers, people that have been giving us shout outs, people that are telling their friends about us, people that are supporting the show. We really, really appreciate it. And, it means a lot that you're on this little journey with us.
If you guys are listening to us on Spotify or iTunes, please give us a follow or review on there. It really does help kind of more people find us. And if you're interested in getting some I Could Murder a Podcast merch, if you like stickers, if you like a cup of coffee, if you like a hat because you're a little bit sunny and you want some shade in your eyes, why not go to our store and get some merch from there? We really do appreciate the support. And we also have a Patreon where we do minisodes, where you guys vote and pick for these episodes.
Yeah. And any support goes directly into the channel. We really do appreciate it. Like I said, if you can't wait until next week's episode, then there's 40 odd other episodes on Patreon for you, all waiting to be binged and binged they shall be.
And like we always say,
we say this all the time.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Unless,
unless you're riding a school bus, look at absolute
U-turns,
bell end,
psychics.
Until next time, guys. See you later.
Bye-bye.